I know it's always torpiness, but I gotta try and get him. Hey, we got one! Okay, Missouri. Hey guys, welcome back to World of Warships. Today we're taking a look at the Missouri. It's been a very long time since I've played this ship, and it's a very special update here since you can actually just buy a Missouri outright, assuming you complete the In the Name of Tomorrow narrative campaign. That's the one where you're playing through operations to earn stars. Assuming you complete that, you can get this ship, this update, for 19,296 doubloons. And with this update towards the end of the year, earning you free doubloons just by playing, there's an argument to be made you could get yourself a Missouri completely for free without inserting your credit card, which is really cool. But is it worth getting? Now let me remind you, Black Friday is also coming up, so those free doubloons you're earning, well, they could go 15 to 30% further, as that's the usual discounts we see on Tier 9 and Tier 8 ships. So 19,000 doubloons for an Iowa with a radar. If you don't know what Missouri is, it was a premium version of an Iowa with a radar and given pretty monstrous credit income. This was one of the original Tier 9 premiums, and it still retains that improved credit income if you got the ship a long time ago. That's really, really important. We need to talk about the credit income of this ship, as it is still the best in the game if you got the ship a long time ago. If you buy it now, it will just be a standard Tier 9 premium credit income. It's only baked in that credit multiplier for those that had the ship years ago. If you get it now, it's still going to earn you a lot of credits, thanks to being a Tier 9 premium. That is, of course, the best tier to be playing premium ships and earning credits in this game, but it's going to be no better than that Alaska B in front of us, for example. I wanted to include this initial clip from this game just to show off how important it is to get up close and use radars to finish off DDs. We just steamrolled that flank. Now, that was the Nevsky radar. So it's questionable if it was Missouri that was that useful there over at Iowa. But still, it's worth pointing out just how powerful radars can be. And on a battleship of all things, Missouri being one of 4 battleships with radar in the entire game. We have Rhode Island, Constellation, Borodino, and Missouri. Missouri's unique here in that we still retain a lot of what makes a Tier 9 American battleship strong. 406mm guns, reasonable armor, upper belt and deck armor being 38 is quite nice. And a lot of the other ships here, Rhode Island, Borodino, Constellation, they'll trade a lot of armor. They'll trade some of their standard Tier 8 battleship characteristics just to gain that radar. Here we're not doing that, and that is worth noting as an advantage. Although, does Missouri armor hold up these days? This was my first game, so definitely don't play it this aggressive. This is what I often do. Try and full send in early on when I'm playing a ship again, haven't played it for a while, just to limit test. And, well, Missouri's got some limits, all right? This ship being farmed down by essentially Hindenburg and Zhao crossfire. Now, there's some Conqueror here at the end. Napoli not doing a ton to us bow on, neither is Neptune. We die very, very quickly here. If you're wondering why I wasn't shooting, by the way, I was waiting to see if Napoli was going to open up for his torps. Wanted to hold to make sure he couldn't get his torps. Didn't realize I'd die that quick to the HE. So we're a radar ship with a 9.5 kilometer radar that doesn't have the best armor these days. Yeah, it's power crept a little bit, okay? Missouri was incredible when it came out, and it still is very strong in the right situation. But you gotta be pretty careful about where you play this ship. Not only versus its own tier, but against tier 10s and certainly super ships. I actually never ran into a game while playing here for this video where I was top tier. It was always tier 10 for sure, or even into super ships. A little bit of unlocked dispersion by the looks of things. Unfortunately, that bug still exists. But hey, we get the Citadel anyway. Very, very lucky to actually land that one. I want to play around caps, but I don't want to get too close to die early. You'll notice there's a Yoshino, a Shikishima, an enemy spawn. So if I was to play bow in like this, I'd be worried that I'd take a lot of pressure there without any way of getting away from those ships. And of course, this is also a submarine match. We spawned on the subflank, so of course we're not going to play as aggressive as well. It's a bit of a problem for Missouri getting value out of this radar these days if you're playing in random battles. If you play something like ranked, I think this radar can still be incredibly useful. You'll still have to contend with something like a Los Andes just YOLO pushing you with its secondaries. Not sure how Missouri deals with that, to be honest with you. but that's not unique to Missouri. A lot of ships are going to struggle to that. Nice little Citadel there, of course. Got to rack up those black ribbons, even if it wasn't much damage. Missouri can still perform pretty well. I had some decent damage games here. It's just that when it was released, we had a very different game meta. A lot of ships had above water citadels back in the day. A lot of cruisers didn't even have 30 millimeters of armor, let me remind you. Now, I'm not saying that was a better thing, okay? Overmatch was incredibly difficult to deal with back then, as it is now. But remember, Zao was the only ship in the game with 30 millimeters of armor as far as cruisers go. Yeah, Togo, deck armor, I know. But for the most part, Zao was the only thing that auto-bounced 406s as far as cruisers were concerned at high tier. So Missouri was overmatching pretty much every cruiser. Also, those cruisers and battleships all had above water, easy hittable citadels. So we get some pretty nice hits there into the Iowa. But a lot has changed, and I think battleship dispersion, standard battleship dispersion here, it's the same as Iowa, can be a little bit trolly when that target we're trying to hit is a lot smaller, as well as anytime the angle, a lot of times we're going to be auto-bouncing those shells. That said, we still can do decent damage into superstructures. It's not like it's an inaccurate ship, okay? Missouri's still quite solid. But I was playing Wisconsin recently as far as the Iowa-style hull is concerned, and that's a little bit fresh in my mind, and that battlecruiser dispersion, it's a massive benefit. We're a tier lower, but also we're a lot worse than an Iowa in a lot of ways. We barely are able to turn in and dodge, or at least angle to that Baji salvo after opening up to fire our rear turret into the Iowa. And that's a bit of an issue because we have worse maneuverability than Iowa. Not only are we lacking in a spotter plane in exchange for this radar, which is a fine and in fact a great trade, that one I would gladly make, but our turning circle radius is 990 meters versus Iowa's 920. Iowa has a 17-second rudder, 17.1, where we have a 19.4-second rudder. And it's noticeable. Now, I haven't played Iowa very much recently. Maybe it would still feel sluggish too, but it's very difficult if you're caught broadside to angle in where you would need to be to dodge shells, or at least bounce shells. And you're not going to be dodging much, so then this large superstructure becomes a pretty massive liability. We need to find those broadsides though, and fortunately Missouri is still very fast. 33 knots for a battleship is solid, good speed at this tier. And with speed flag, you can bump that up too. Our concealment's great at 12.7 kilometers, so you should be trying to surprise enemy ships on a flank, catching their broadsides, that kind of thing. Here we're also shooting into a destroyer. Yorktown doesn't have a citadel, so not bothering to shoot his broadside. That's pretty sad, I know. But look at the damage into a DD, right? We're within range to get the radar. We've got island cover here. Shikishima, Baji don't have our broadside because the island's in the way. I was hoping that we could finish off this hull, but Hull is a rather new ship that was released recently. That's Des Moines Guns, super heals, engine boost that makes it pretty maneuverable. I'm just going to overlead this here, but it's difficult to deal with a lot of these new ships, guys. When you're playing a ship that was released back in the day, like 8 years ago, 9 years ago, you can really notice the power difference, all right? Yeah, it's tier 10 versus tier 9, but we barely survive here. I was unfortunately not able to finish him off. Our Smolensk, understandably, ducking behind cover there. There's a Shikishima Baji crossfiring him in spawn. Don't blame him for not sticking it out to try and finish off that hull. But I overcommitted, and I was punished massively for it. We took so much damage there. And we can't heal nearly as much back. That's the other problem. We have a worse heal than Iowa. We did not receive the buff that the mainline American battleships got a very long time ago now, where their heals are 18.5%. Nice little citadel for the road as we're about to go down. 18.5% HP is what every Iowa heal gets you back. We only get 14% back, which is standard, totally standard, right? But that's a pretty nice buff and helps deal with the downside Iowa has of not being the most maneuverable, taking a lot of damage to its superstructure, can heal a lot more of that back. Again, decent accuracy, especially at these closer ranges. We got ourselves a dev strike. Still going to do great into these situations here. Playing against some tier 8s, there's a few tier 10s in this one, but fighting against tier 8s, we're still incredibly powerful. But that heal disadvantage, it hurts. Something like Alabama also has to deal with that, where they didn't buff the premium ships with that heal. You'll notice the other American battleships often will have either this improved heal, like the Monty line gets, 18.5%, or they'll have fast cooldown heals. That's very common on American battleships these days, like Ohio, Massachusetts, Georgia. we often are seeing that 40-second cooldown on American battleships, and we don't get that here either. So a lot of time between these heals. They don't heal nearly as much back. I noticed I took a lot of extra damage to my ship, my superstructure. So it's a little bit tough to stay alive in situations where we want to be getting use of that radar. 9.5 kilometer radar is great when you get up close to those caps. It lasts for 35 seconds, so you're guaranteed 2 salvos out of this ship, which can do immense damage into destroyers, as well as, well, your teammates are probably going to be shooting at that DD too. And oftentimes that can be the difference between losing a flank, or at least a flank stalling out, and you just steamrolling through. Getting rid of those DDs can be an excellent thing, and having a radar on a battleship is absolutely incredible. But that's the reason to get it. 19,000 doubloons for a worse Iowa, but it gets a little bit of bonus on having a radar here. Worse heal, worse maneuverability. That's a tough sell, man. That's a really tough sell. Remember, you're not getting the improved credit income that all the Missouri owners had back in the day. That has been removed from this ship if you buy it now. Those of you that already have it, don't worry, it's still there. But this is just for people looking to get the ship now. You won't be getting that extra income that some people who already had Missouri will get. And you'll see after this battle, we get an obscene amount of credits out of this ship. It's still a great credit printer. Even without that extra bonus, I can't really show you that, unfortunately, because I did get the Missouri a long time ago, so I have that built-in credit multiplier. But even without it, Tier 9, we all know, just go look at any of those Tier 9 premium videos that I do or others do, or any of the Tier 9 premiums you have, you know how much you earn. It's very solid credit income. Unfortunately, you do have to deal with some of the worst matchmaker in the game, in my opinion. I find Tier 9 and Tier 8 to be brutally difficult to play because you're often up-tiered, and those up-tiers result in games dealing with some pretty heavy gimmick ships that have been released over the last couple of years. It's understandable that most people are playing gimmick-heavy ships. Why would you play the very old vanilla ships that have massive weaknesses, don't have insane gimmicks to exploit, right? It makes sense. You're hopping on World of Warships, you're just trying to have a good time. You're going to play something reasonably powerful because it's PvP. You want to be having something that's reasonably strong. But if you're playing some of these older ships, it's tough, man. I ran into a Piemonte, by the way, and some of the damage I was taking, even directly angled into him, was ridiculous. Like 10 to 16k salvos consistently. Oh my goodness, it is so brutal. I can't even imagine what a Columbo would do to this thing. I also wanted to include here how much damage I was getting into an angled Hindenburg. So we talk about overmatch a lot, but even if we can't full pen or overmatch through Hindenburg armor here, it's got 30 millimeters. Hindenburg is not maneuverable, and it does have a large superstructure. So in this case, if we're hitting that superstructure, we can actually get some pretty good damage into him. Now this is an arms race game, so we do have some massive ship buffs, so take it with a grain of salt, right? There's some nice buffs to our alpha damage in particular, as well as our reload. But it's still showing that 406s can still do great damage, even if they don't overmatch their target. Obviously, we want to be finding those broadsides with a ship like this one, but you can't go off on a flank on your own. You can't over push in a ship like this one early on. Notice my push here is very late in the game and is going to be very safe because of that. It's hard to play aggressive when we don't have the healing, we don't have the armor that we used to, and the DPM has been cranked up at these mid and longer ranges as we're getting into these higher tier games. And Missouri dealing with that Tier 9 matchmaker issue doesn't help it out, although all of the Tier 9s are going to struggle with that to different degrees, depending on how powerful they are, how many gimmicks they have. But considering this is essentially just an Iowa, 19,000 doubloons in 2025 sounds like too much if you want this ship for the gameplay. If you're a collector, I think it's a different story. But gameplay, I think 19,000 doubloons is far too much for this experience. But that, of course, is just my opinion on this ship these days. Let me know in the comments down below, especially if you have a Missouri, you've played it recently. How'd you find it in today's meta? And maybe people can get some alternative perspectives down in the comments. It's tough, though, for me to recommend this one to anybody outside of collectors. Iowa has had some buffs that Missouri doesn't have, and it still feels like a very vanilla, old-school battleship without any of the gimmicks to really push it over the edge in today's matchmaker, where Tier 9 is often against Tier 10 super ships, subs, carriers. Tough to deal with that these days with an old school ship. As for the build that I was running here, looks a little something like this. Trying to maximize that radar a little bit more, so getting the duration up there. It's very nice. 9.5 kilometers range is decent, and the duration is very, very good. I tried to greed for a little bit of extra damage with super heavy AP here, especially after that first game where I melted so quickly. Played a little further back. Noticed we survived a lot longer in those battles. And typically, if we're in a situation where the fires are going to tick us out because we took super heavy AP, I was probably dead anyway in something like a Missouri. So taking it, I don't feel like is too bad of a deal here, especially because our concealment's so good already. And while the maneuverability is not great from rudder shift, turning circle radius, the speed is excellent here. The concealment is excellent. 9 406s with battleship dispersion is good, but it's also not battle cruiser dispersion like we see on Wisconsin. I know that's a tier 10, and it is very different. That ship is crazy at tier 10. But it is worth mentioning there's some inconsistency there, even if you do manage to find some of those broadsides. Now, I believe here is where we'll see the difference in the credit income. That's why I got so much out of that last game. Although even a standard tier 9 premium probably would get, it's well over $1 million there, maybe close to $1.5 million without that extra 30% that we see here on this bonus package. You will not, I'll repeat, you do not get that extra little bit. You just get standard tier 9 credit income. In fact, let me just check GQ Johnny here while we're at it. Yeah, it's 10%. So it is just plus 30% there on Missouri credit income if you had it beforehand. If you buy Missouri now, this update, this is the bonus package you'll have. It'll be 10% instead of the 40% that you see here. I'm going over this too much, I know, but I just don't want people to be buying the ship under the impression that they're getting that extra credit income when they're not. You're buying the ship for its gameplay purposes because there's so many tier 9 premiums these days that you probably already have one if it's for coal, for steel, for research points that will earn you the same amount of credits on the same amount of base XP compared to Missouri these days if you get it now. Worth mentioning, though, with this In the Name of Tomorrow event, this is where you're getting San Diego already. So just by completing this event, you get San Diego. If you already have San Diego, you get 11,000 doubloons, and that is really cool to see. So well worth completing this event. I already went over some of the strategies around Arctic Convoy. I was a little late to that one. I'll try to be a little sooner on the next one. This is a great event to play through, though, if you're wanting to. This is how you will unlock Missouri, by the way. You have to finish that event, and then once you have, you can go over to the Armory In the Name of Tomorrow side of things. And at the very bottom, you'll find the Missouri pack here for 19k doubloons. It's locked for now until we beat that In the Name of Tomorrow narrative campaign. That's just too much for Missouri gameplay. I gotta say, for me, it was not particularly enjoyable to play the Missouri these days, and maybe I got unlucky with Matchmaker. Maybe I was playing bad. It could have been skill issue for sure, but it just felt so powercraft. And I really got no good value out of using the radar because either someone else, another ship, because there's so many ships with radars these days, already got it, like that Nevsky, or I was burnt down before I could even get a chance to use that radar at close range. It's tough out there, man, for older ships like this one these days. They can still work, but making use of this gimmick over Iowa, it's hard to do that in random battles in particular. In ranked modes, other game modes, I can see it getting a lot more value, but otherwise it feels like in randoms, it's for the most part just a worse version of Iowa, which is probably not worth 19k doubloons. But again, that is just my take on it. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.